We should probably be teaching people how to do podcasts. Well, look at the, if you look up at the...
This will just take a minute.
You too can have 20 followers.
Hey, look at the, see how the, we'll teach you how to go from 0 to 27 overnight.
Do we need to talk loud? Green eggs and ham.
Just need you to hold this under your tongue for 30 seconds. When you wake up, the podcast will be over. Like, I'm not comfortable talking about distance running on camera. That's what we're going to talk about.
Welcome to the Lift Heavy Run Long podcast. I'm Vaughn.
I'm Wilson.
I'm Brian Williams.
We are here with Brian Williams, a great friend of mine who is going to be sharing with us some of the wild and crazy races that he's done and the wild and crazy distances, and going to give us a little insight on what that feels like and how you go about doing that. You recently finished the Zane Gray 50 miler, which was billed as the most difficult 50-mile race in North America.
I did. It was a great experience.
Were they telling the truth? Was it the most difficult?
It was. Well, I can't. I haven't run them all, but I can certainly say it was the most difficult one that I've ever run.
Well, tell us your background. Tell us about some of the other races that you've done.
How did you get into running? Let's back all the way up and tell me about how you got to where you are now. When did running even come into the picture? I know you played football in high school.
I did. I played for Germantown. Running came into the picture probably 7 or 8 years ago. I woke up one morning and got on the scale, and I was 255 pounds, and decided that something needed to change. You know, I had always been a big guy, but I had been a weightlifter and a football player, and that had kind of changed into being just a big guy. And so,
right. Going from a big weightlifter, a big football player, to just a big person happens pretty quick.
So I talked to my wife, and we bought a treadmill, and I started walking on the treadmill, and I signed up for a 5K and decided I was going to race it as hard as I possibly could. Mm-hmm. And I ended up having a stress fracture at the end of that 5K. A 255-pound guy running as hard as he can with no experience is not the smartest thing to do.
Yeah.
So I sat on the couch and started to diet, and as soon as my stress fracture was healed, I started walking again and started losing some weight, and I joined a group called Memphis in Motion, run by Mark Higginbotham in Memphis. He does interval running, and I just started slowly and started working up longer and longer and longer.
Uh-huh. Can anybody join Memphis in Motion?
Absolutely.
Cost anything?
I believe he charges about $40 a month, but it was worth every penny.
Yeah.
I joined the group. I can remember out there the first time with him, and I've always been a low-tech runner, and I had on, 5-year-old tennis shoes that had holes in the front of them, and we were just doing about 7 miles. And I can remember thinking at about 3.5, we were still moving away from where we had parked the cars, and I was almost in panic. I just was like, holy smokes, I am still moving away from the cars. How am I going to get back? But from that experience, he just slowly added miles on and signed up for a marathon, and the rest is history.
So when you said interval running, what did you mean by that?
Well, I started doing 1-1s, which is you run for 1 minute and then walk for a minute and recover. Mm-hmm. And as you get in more shape and your body gets used to things, you might go to 1.5 minutes and then 2 minutes and walk for a minute. And I actually ran my first marathon, which was St. Jude, doing 3 minutes running, 1 minute walking.
Yeah, wow.
So big change.
Well, you say, I watch you now, and you're a very casual runner. Unless it's race time, then, of course, you get after it. And in your training, which I don't want to have anything to do with running with you in your training, have you always been pretty relaxed as far as moving forward? Or I guess what I'm getting at is I see a lot of people that I think that not the difficulty of running is what makes them not enjoy it, but the difficulty with their expectations in their head and dreading not being this fast or not having this kind of mile time. Did you just go after it more from a standpoint of I want to get some weight off and I want to feel a little better, or did you have goals in mind when you first started?
When I first started, it was strictly a weight thing. And what I tried to do, I was not worried about time. I was not worried about distance. But what I was worried about was every time I went out, every single time, I tried to go a little farther or a little faster. It didn't matter if it was 10 extra yards. There were some days that, I would finish a run and I would literally force myself to just walk an extra, football field, whatever the case was. Mm-hmm. But I added distance or time or intensity to every single workout. Mm-hmm. And slowly but surely, I mean, you would think that adding 100 yards is not even worth doing, but it's not long before you're really putting some distance on your feet. I mean, it's...
Mm-hmm. So what made you decide to go do your first marathon?
Well, I joined that group, Memphis in Motion, and I've always been competitive. But so you're running with friends, and I'm very much a social runner. And everybody is talking about their next event. What are they doing next? And Memphis in Motion is a distance group. They teach you how to run marathons, half marathons and marathons. And so everybody was talking about their upcoming races. And so I had nothing on the books. And so I'm out there running in the heat of August trying to lose weight. And everybody's talking about their races. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do St. Jude full in December.
What distance what was the furthest distance you'd run at that point when you made that decision?
I don't know what the distance was as far as training goes. It wasn't very far, but the most I'd ever run was a 5K. So I had decided that everybody's doing a marathon. I'm in.
Nice.
Yeah. And you had how many months to prepare for that?
St. Jude is always the first week of December, and it was mid-August. So not a whole long time.
No.
That's pretty impressive.
What do you think you weighed when you made that decision? What was your weight versus when you started St. Jude?
I was probably 25 pounds down from my total, and I probably ran St. Jude at about 220.
Okay.
So
now with your weight loss, did that come more from running or dieting, or was it the combination of both? I want to hear you say it was only running, and I continued eating just as crappy as I always had, and I never get that answer.
It started off as just running, but as I started, I'm very competitive, and as I started to care about my times and my distance and wanted to accomplish bigger and better things, you don't have any choice. Sooner or later, diet comes into play. It's the only way to do it.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Damn it.
So after your marathon, when did you transition to, okay, I want to go crazy and do some
what was
longer
the next big
ultra
thing?
runs?
I ran several marathons, and it took several marathons before I actually started to learn really how to run. But a friend of mine years ago invited me to run Sylamore. And so I had signed up for the Little Rock Marathon and had done fairly well. For that time, for me, I had run that race very well. And he had said, Sylamore's in 2 weeks, and it didn't used to sell out like it does today. Mm-hmm. And so I signed up, and I was like, sure, I'm in. And I absolutely fell in love with that race.
Oh, yeah.
And since then, I have not raced a full marathon on the road since that point.
Okay.
So,
and how long ago was that?
So this year was my 5th year of Sylamore in a row.
Nice.
And your first year, I remember you telling me about where you finished in consecutive years, and it was pretty impressive.
I got better every year. Running is a thing. They say that if you are consistent, you will improve for about 7 to 8 years, and that's everybody. So if you're out there running 4 days a week, you will just naturally get better for about 7 years. And so my first year, I was very disappointed with my time. I finished, and I loved it, but it just about killed me. I ran, I think, a 7:15.
Okay.
And then year 2, I ran a 5:48.
Wow.
So big improvements. But the first year was so tough on me that it took me almost a year before I signed up for the race again.
And that's a 50K, by the way.
That's a 50K, yeah.
31 miles.
So
that's pretty impressive.
When did you find the trails off the road? I'm assuming that, like, training for St. Jude, you were primarily a road runner.
It was primarily road runner, but the group Memphis in Motion is kind of a all over the place group. Mm-hmm. So it's a large group. Some people like roads, some people like trails, and so I'm a social runner, and so I just kind of went where the group went. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, but I didn't really fall in love with the trails until Sylamore.
Yeah, that happens. It's a great place to do it.
It is, absolutely.
Do you feel more comfortable on the trails from like a joint and body pain standpoint? Do you see much difference?
I don't see much difference, but I haven't had many problems as far as joint and body pain either. So you might be able to contribute that to the trails.
Yeah. Well, you take something like Sylamore, which is clearly more intense than St. Jude, like a road marathon, depending on how you run it. Some marathon road runners are just run at such a speed that it's very intense, but the terrain is pretty intense. But then you move on up to some of the things that like you do now, the Zane Gray and the Barkley. How did you get to that? How did those come about?
I can remember, I guess, after running Sylamore the second time and having such a big improvement, I was on road actually in Shelby Farms running, and we had run about 25 miles, and I still felt very fresh, felt very good, and I thought, you know what, maybe there's more out there, and so I started searching for 50 milers, and if you just Google search 50 milers, all kind of races come up, and Carl Touchstone in Mississippi, the Mississippi 50 was my first 50 miler.
Okay.
And then that's what you just completed.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, you guys just went and did that. And then, but Zane Gray was there, so I had researched it, and on the website it has all kind of things that basically will scare a normal human being away. Just do not run this. This is not your normal ultra. This is not just harder than the other ultra you ran last weekend. But it intrigued me, and so for years I've gone back to that website and just kind of looked at it, and over the course of years, my races have gotten harder. I kind of stair-stepped. You do a 50-miler, then you do another 50-miler, then you do Ouachita, then you branch out and do your first, 24-hour run where you maybe get 80 miles at the Tour de Spirit. Then I did my first 100. It just kind of mushroomed, it just. But I kept going back to Zane Gray. And finally, last year, I decided that if I was ever going to do it, they introduced the lottery this year. So normally, you have to send your resume of races into the race director, and he then approves you and gives you the code to sign up. And so last year, they announced that not only do you have to do that, but then they were going to go to lottery. And with ultra running taking off in popularity, I just figured now is the time. If I'm ever going to do a race of that caliber, with everybody wanting a coveted bid for some of the older, more popular, tougher races, it was the time to try it. So I sent my resume in, and he allowed me to lottery. He gave me the lottery code, and on, I guess, November 31st of last year, I got an email congratulating me on the race entry.
Awesome.
So just like it sounds, when you say you sent your resume in, they don't allow just any knucklehead to show up and say, I got $100.
That's right. That's right.
And do this.
They
I couldn't just
cross-reference
walk
you.
in and sign up.
That's right. You have to send, your races that you've done and your finishing times in, and then they cross-reference your ultra sign-up sheet according to that, and then they approve you or disapprove you.
Wow.
And so where is this race at?
This race was in Pine, Arizona, about 2 hours north of Phoenix.
Okay. And it was just a couple of weeks ago.
It was 2 weekends ago.
So in
That's
April.
Right. That's right.
And so it's hot.
It was hot, but it's a different kind of heat.
Okay.
It's the you can't explain it, but it's not the muggy heat that you have here. So when you're out there, you're hot and sweating, but you don't feel wet. Whereas in Memphis, you walk out the front door and 5 minutes later, your shirt's soaking wet.
Yeah.
So the only real way that you're sweating in Pine, Arizona is my shirt had salt rings. You would sweat and you leave a ring as it dried, and then as you would sweat, it would leave. So I looked like a tree. You could count my rings.
They would know how many hours you were out there when
right.
they find you dead on the side of the trail. They're like, look like you've been running about 13 hours.
That's
so.
right.
So you showed us a picture earlier. It's all it looked uphill and rocky, like just nasty.
It is extremely uphill and rocky.
Well, you had described it to me when we were on the trail this weekend. You said it was basically it sucked in every way, whereas some trails they're very rocky, or some trails are very hilly, or some trails are this. You said it was just all of those things thrown in together.
That's right. You know, I've run a lot of races at this point, and most of the races, you'll go somewhere and it'll be 115 degrees outside, but the trail will be smooth, and or you'll go somewhere and it'll be 12,000 feet of climbing, or you'll go somewhere and it'll be very remote. This one had all aspects of all. It was technical. There was 12,000 feet of climbing. You were alone for 3 or 4 hours at a time. In the 50-plus miles that we ran, we only crossed one dirt road.
Wow.
So they had ham radio operators that had hiked in the previous day to certain spots in case, there was an emergency. And so you just come across these random people that, on the trail.
So do they have no aid stations, or was it?
They did have aid stations, but they were very spread out. There was a water drop in the middle, but from 17 to 33, you were basically on your own. There was no. Was it 54 miles from point to point, or did you go? It was a point-to-point race on the Mogollon Rim, and I know I didn't say that right, but you basically you'd go up the rim and you would run a 7 or 8 mile stretch, and you'd come down, and so you would go up and down this rim the entire day. It was a pretty incredible experience. You would get to the top of that thing and you would look out, and there was no sign of people anywhere. No power lines, no roads, no glint of silver in the distance from somebody's house. It was as remote as I've ever been. It was incredible.
How many feet are in a mile? I'm giving you a
3,000.
Yeah, 5,000 something.
5,000. So you had to go 2 miles just that way, like towards the rafters.
Absolutely.
Oh my God.
It was an incredible race, though. It was well worth doing. I mean, it's a bucket list race. It has been for me.
The hardest race you've ever done?
By far. Yeah.
You said it crossed you in every race. Does it cross your mind from a left field standpoint that I'm going to quit or I'm not going to make it?
Absolutely. In the middle where the water drop was, there was a guy, a ham radio operator, and a $10 chair sitting out there it was a water drop, and 1 or 2 guys that had run the race before had gotten in there. And I'm sitting there in this chair, and I was thinking to myself, if there's ever a place, we're on the top of the rim looking out over the best view that I had seen all day. And I was just sitting there. If there was ever a place to quit, this would be it. And, I even verbalized it to the guy that was standing there. He came over and he goes, "You've been sitting there for a while. Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm thinking about dropping." And he simply said, "You don't want to do that." And I thought about it for a couple seconds, and I said, "You're right." And I stood up, and the guy gave me a hug, and the next thing you knew, I was back on the trail again.
Wow.
Hugs will do that.
Hugs will do that.
I'm trying to tell y'all.
When you're in a
do
dark
that.
spot, man, hugs are good.
Wow.
That blows my mind. Knowing you and knowing the way that you think, I just can't even imagine you being in a position and saying, "No mas, I'm going to wrap it up." I can't even imagine you even verbalizing that. So, I mean, this must have been just unbelievable.
Yeah, because you've done 100-mile races before.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Several.
I say that to myself. I say that at aid stations during a 5K. I can't do it. I can't do it anymore. Crying. Can't make it. So for you to say that, that's nuts. Now tell me about Barkley.
I've run the Barkley Fall Classic, which is not the full Barkley. It's not the Barkley Marathons. It's a version they do in September, which was an exceptional race as well. Totally different from Zane Gray, but it's outside of Knoxville, and it's a great race. There was virtually 13,000 feet of elevation change in that one as well, which you would not think during that race, but it's not like Zane Gray where you started at elevation, but there's still hills outside of Knoxville. I mean, it's still in the mountains. It's just you start at 1,000 and go to 3,000 instead of starting at 5 and going to 7. So the race was incredible. We actually ran through Brushy Mountain Prison and went into the hole, one of the places where Laz had set up a checkpoint to punch your bib.
That's cool.
They make you run.
If you've never seen the documentary on Netflix, Amazon, what's it called?
It's called the Barkley.
It's called the Barkley Marathon.
The Barkley Marathons, and it's awesome. That's really intense.
It was that was an incredible experience. It's worth doing.
So you had to run. Tell me about running through the jail.
The jail is the abandoned jail where James Earl Ray was. He escaped, and I think now I don't know if I got the story 100% right, but I believe they found him 5 days later, less than 8 miles from the jail.
Right. Yeah.
He literally could not get out of the woods. So, which formed the story. You know, Laz started the race that way. He was like, I think I could have done better than that. And so, the jail sits in the bottom of what I would call, I guess, an upside down volcano. You come down a 2,000-foot climb, and there's the jail at the bottom, and we ran through the administration offices and down the cell blocks.
Oh, really? Wow, I didn't realize you went inside the
Oh, yeah, we
prison.
actually got
That's
to go
pretty
in. I
cool.
don't know how Laz pulled that off, but it was a great experience.
Pitch black.
Pitch black. Well, the cell blocks weren't because they had lights, but you had to go back out the back, and then you went into the hole where they kept the prisoners that had done
That's
something
awesome.
wrong.
I got to do this.
And that was pitch black.
Yeah.
It was literally, you'd been out in the sun all day, and you go down these stairs, and you're in the hole, and you can't see your hand in front of your face, and your thoughts are, what are they going to do? I mean, you had been through so much by that point anyway. Are they going to jump out and scare you
Oh
now?
my God. Yeah.
And so there's a guy at the end of the hall that you can't see, and he asked, "What do you need?" And so once you knew where he was, you went to him, and he turned his light on, and he punched your bib, and then you had to figure your way back out.
Wow.
Once you got out, you went back up the backside of the mountain, which was not the longest climb of the day, but the steepest climb of the day through Rat Jaw, which is just sawbriars, straight up sawbriars for about a mile. And I don't know, it was great. It was.
Oh, I can imagine. It sounds like an incredible
Yeah,
experience.
the race, I don't know how they pulled it off, but the race is an experience. I highly recommend doing it. And that one is...
And you need some navigational skills
not
as
this
well.
one. In the full Barkley, it's all navigation and maps. They give you a map. Everything about the race is designed to kind of mess with you. So they give you a map, but you don't really need it. So you it's roughly marked. Every 3 or 4 miles, at major intersections, they would say turn here, or if it wasn't a actual trail, if you were bushwhacking, which was about a third of the race, somebody that punched your bib would say, okay, your next direction is to go up this power line. And so you kind of had a sense of where to go. So you weren't lost, but you were alone and lost just enough to give you a little twinge.
I hate that feeling.
I do too.
It's scary.
I
wouldn't be able to go a quarter mile like that without completely breaking down. Just the thought of being off track for any amount of time scares me to death. And doing a race that's, 30 or 50 miles long, that would be terrifying. The whole time that would be just going through my head. Am I lost? Am I lost? If I get lost, how am I going to handle this?
Yeah, imagine you're running a 50-mile race and then you accidentally run 3 miles the wrong way.
Oh, yeah.
And you got to turn around and come back.
I've had that happen.
Yeah.
It'll destroy
We're having
you
a
mentally.
conversation. If you put on a race and it's 50 miles and I go 51, we got to have a talk. We got to have a talk.
Well, you start to think you're lost, right? I mean, if you've gone long, if the next checkpoint's supposed to be 7 miles and you've gone 9, which, of course, at that race, that's absolutely what they do to you.
Well, what
on
did they
purpose.
tell you it was going to? What was it?
Well, they would tell you that it's going to be, the first checkpoint was, I think, 7 miles in. It's supposed to be, and it was 9. So your drop bag was supposed to be at mile 20. It was actually at 31. It was supposed to be a 50K. The race turned into 42 miles. So, but you know that kind of going in. So that race, the experience is the doubt, and can you do it, and can you pull it off, and that's what made that race unique and such a wonderful deal.
So, Laz, that's just like a culmination of every person that's ever said you're almost there.
That is exactly right.
And
that is exactly right. You were almost there.
That was
you're
the
almost
last
there.
hill.
Your drop
There's
bag.
no more
There's no
hills.
more
right
hills.
here. You're out of the briars.
But you're not allowed to take climbing poles for the next 10 miles.
Right.
You wonder why he said that. It's like,
That's great. When you started running, did you ever dream you'd be where you are now, or did it just take hold of you and guide you?
no, I had no idea. I absolutely hated running when I started. I used running to lose weight, and that was the end of it. Through groups like yours and Memphis in Motion and several others, breakaway running, all those guys, you make friends, and then it becomes a social aspect, and so then you're out there with your friends running. And then I started liking running. I actually, one day, I don't know where the line in the sand was, but I crossed it. And then it was, instead of I have to go run, I would like to go run. And so you start texting people that you enjoy being with. It's like, hey, let's go run 10 miles. And, it totally morphed.
Yeah.
Well, it gets to where that 10 miles feels good. That's
absolutely
that's something that makes you feel much better. Whereas before, it's like, oh man, that sucked. But now it's, man, this is kind of therapy for me.
That is
in a way,
exactly right.
I really enjoy it.
Instead of 10 miles ruining your day, 10 miles is the start of your day.
Yeah.
You don't have a good day unless you've done that.
Yeah. Well, that's what we did this weekend. It was great for me to get out and run 9 miles with you, but what I really needed to do was get out, and have somebody to talk to and get some things off my chest. And, on a personal level, I can't thank you enough for, you took me in when I was first getting into the running aspect of it. You were there and said, I'll do miles with you, and I'll do them at your pace, and I'll do them when you want to do them. And that's what opened the door to all this. And that's what that's what I'd like to get across to people who are trying to make that decision, whether to get into it or not.
Right.
That there's people at all levels that will come down to your level and get you to a different level and allow you to be a part of the group. And I think you are about as good of an example of somebody who's willing to do that as I've ever seen, and I greatly appreciate that.
Everybody had a beginning, including me. I mean, hopefully your beginning changes into something that, I love it so much, I want to almost push it on other people. It absolutely changed who I am.
Yeah. And there's some, going back to what you were saying, the ultra running community and the trail running community is such a awesome community of people. It doesn't matter if the guy that's running and winning the race is just as encouraging as the guy that's, at the back of the race. And everybody's in this thing together. We're all suffering through this 50 or 100 mile race or whatever it is. And everybody kind of just accepts everybody and where they're at, and it's not something you get in other, communities. It's more like, oh, I'm the big shot here.
That's not there.
It's not really that big shot type attitude. It's just like everybody's kind of all inclusive.
Right.
That is very true. You almost get tired of saying good job. You're looking good as you're waving.
And I can speak from experience. There are a great deal of benefits to finishing last. Everybody gets to get back there and wait on you and have a few beers and get excited and loose, and then when they see you, it's like a welcome home parade.
Well, there are a lot of races that even give an award. It's a big deal to be last.
I need to be in those races.
It's a giant accomplishment. I know Ouachita gives away a DFL.
Do they?
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't know that.
They've got I believe this year it was a chicken.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Chicken.
It's like a tin rooster. Or
yeah,
something.
A tin rooster, something, which is great. I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
You did it too. It's not just everybody. You finished.
Anybody that finishes that race has done something incredible.
Absolutely.
For sure.
I agree.
That's great. Well, man, I so much appreciate you taking time out of your day to come do this. You know how much I enjoy it, and I appreciate you coming on.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Brian.